Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Kenney, and this is episode 23 of ZK Live. Today we have David Andreozzi from Andreozzi Architects. David is an AIA certified architect. He's also the president of the New England Institute of Classical Architecture and Art. He's a very talented architect. If you haven't followed his stuff on Instagram yet, you got to check out some of his work. He has an emphasis on historic architecture. And we're going to bring him on and we're going to talk about a bunch of things relating to design, running your own business, painting, and we're going to bring him on right now. There you are.
Hi.
Hello there.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for coming on.
Great.
I was very excited. I have to say, this is the first time I've been nervous on this show. I've talked to a bunch of people I know pretty well, and they're in my world. As painters, so to bring on a big fancy architect is fun, and I'm excited.
Well, that's the first problem with architects in general is, they most architects walk around with this illusion that they're something special, and that's how they're perceived, and that's actually a problem with our entire industry. I grew up in the construction field. My father was a carpenter. I grew up on a job site, probably 11 or 12 years old, dragging junk to the dumpster. And I eventually graduated up to taking a hammer in my hand. And it's one point I ran projects, and when going through college, I drafted small projects of my father. And then when I went off to RISD, I was actually taking furniture making in addition to the cabinetry level woodworking that I learned on the construction site. So my vision of what an architect is, or the soul of what I am, is the opposite of what most people perceive a pompous architect to be. But I still do have a bow tie.
I love it. It's the juxtaposition. It's like, once they get to know you, it's like, oh, wow. But man, yeah, the bow tie and those circle glasses, you look the part.
Yeah.
Yes, those are the real pronounced ones.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a problem with the field. I mean, when I'm out on a construction site, I'm visualizing all the people as equals. I mean, and I think that at the end of the day, when everybody is an equal and you're on the same team, and you're not spoken down to, and you're respecting other people's opinion, and you're learning from other people, I think that greater things are actually created by learning from other people. I mean, that's the way I look at my architectural practice, is that 1 and 1 equals 3. And I know that's oversimplified, but that is the way everything in our architectural practice is. I mean, we have a small practice, but everything we do, I couldn't do alone. I need the people in my practice to be working with me, to building it, to making it better. And it's the exact same thing with the field. I mean, when I'm showing up in that field, whether it be talking to heating, HVAC, or whether it be talking to an expert like yourself, I'm taking in this knowledge and I'm learning. And I'm never sort of saying, well, I've done this for 20 years, so just do what I'm telling you, or you're not going to be in the next job site. That's an arcane way that things were done.
That's interesting. I learned recently that I heard a little bit of a perspective on architecture and what architects were 100 years ago. Someone was saying that it was the wealthy people sent their kids off to Europe to be architects so they could come back and be fancy. And it was a very fancy, highfalutin trade.
I mean, it would be great to get a couple of experts in that. I mean, I can give you the light version, but the light version is, if you look at it, some of the greatest architects in the late 1800s, mid 1800s through the beginning of the 1900s were from the wealthiest families. They were either from the wealthiest families in the world, or they were married into the wealthiest families into the world. And that's how you ended up in these clubs and meeting the Carnegies and Burnham Root in Chicago, all connections of basically marrying into and connecting to wealth so that you're meeting at the polo club and you're building an addition to the polo club. And that is, and again, it goes at that time. You go to the Beaux-Arts, L'École de Beaux-Arts in Paris. You come back, and you're an architect, and you've got a little bit of pedigree, and everybody in the club likes to meet you, and that is exactly how it was.
That's fascinating. So you're a little hybrid of, because I would imagine clients on some level still expect some of that. Because I mean, you're building big homes a lot of times. Do you find that you have to sort of play both parts? You have to be able to talk to the contractor, but also talk to the client, who we'll assume has a lot of money and maybe wants a more sophisticated discussion?
So I think that there are different type of clients, and different type of clients choose different types of architects. The type of clients that want sort of cutting edge, not even state of the art, but ahead of the art, cutting edge things that are in magazines, award winning. I've never seen that bubblegum architecture. They're not going to hire me. I mean, they're going to hire somebody else, and they're going to hire, and their architecture is most probably going to be dated in 10 years, but it's going to look good for 4 or 5, and it's going to win a lot of awards. And so those people are drawn to, I think, what you're saying, which is the star architect. And what we're sort of focused in on, I've spent my life focusing in on, again, probably from that same basis of connecting to the job site and people, is actually making clients' dreams come true. So my architecture, if you look through my website, is diverse. It's based, each one is usually representative of the individual person or couple that I'm working with. So I could tell stories about somebody saying, we were designing a house, a French Norman style house, and we had this beautiful French Norman style house. It was all stone. It was big, it was beautiful, and it was the imagery that they had ripped out, and it was spectacular. And then they went on a vacation to Tuscany and came back and started talking, oh my God, we traveled through Italy, and is it possible that we can transfer this and have it stucco and Italian? And I'm like, I'm not even sure. And so we created this hybrid of the two, and I said, this actually works. And so we created something that it had nothing to do with me. It was all about the client. And that to me is what I love about architecture, is meeting a couple, meeting a family, and making their dreams come true. It isn't about you coming to me and me giving you another Andreozzi that you've seen in Architectural Digest. And I have nothing wrong with that type of architecture. That's what people do. They do it very well. They create a brand. You go to John Smith or Joan Smith and you expect to get that brand, and they deliver. So there's nothing wrong with that. So I guess they both can exist.
Yeah.
I think that was a long answer.
No, I love it. You do see that. I like that your homes do feel very timeless often. They're not like trendy. And we see so many trends in our business where it's like, wow, that's, we all know that's beautiful today, but give it some time and it'll set what decade it was made in.
That's like the biggest lost thing in architecture right now, or in all of society right now, is that people are looking in the glossy magazines for like the latest sweet toy, and they want one of those. It could be a glass handrail. It could be the ridiculous Zaha Hadid toilet paper looking, or Frank Gehry edition that comes in angles and in shapes. And really what they should be thinking about, and this is a long story. I won't give you the 9-hour version, but I mean, I was involved with a group called CORA, the Congress of Residential Architecture, and then AIA CRAN, a custom residential architecture network. And our book, we actually built videos. So you go to YouTube, called CRAN TV, short, like 3-minute videos that I built with a friend of mine, John Ish, who was also on the board. And you'll see a lot of local Rhode Island architecture on there because I helped build them. But these videos are about stressing to clients or potential clients, number one, the importance of why you hire an architect. But number two, that the reason you hire an architect, most importantly, is for the resale value of your house when you're done. And unless you can afford to spend X amount of money and say, I'm going to live in this house for 15 years, and I don't care what it's worth when it's done. I don't care if there's a bowling alley in the basement that nobody wants, and all of these ridiculous things, but that's what I want, and I don't care what if that's great. But the average person, 98% of the people in this world, they do care. That's their nest egg for when they retire. So when you spend $100,000 or $1 million on a house, and you then decide how much money you're going to spend on that house, that is crucial to the key of how much it's going to be worth at the end. And it actually keys in on two levels. Number one, from a schematic programmatic standpoint, what do you put in and what don't you put in for the budget? But then it gets into a point of the quality you put in, which keys into exactly what you do. So I can use cheap materials. I can get the bonus room, and I can get the big window, and I can get the cheap this and the cheap that. And my girlfriend has that, and my boyfriend has that. And that's great. You can get all that stuff, or you can actually step back and say, we should be thinking about design and then the quality of materials. A wonderful architect and writer named Sarah Sizanka has written about 8 books. So she's a British architect, based out of the United States now. She wrote a book in 1998 called the Not So Big House, and it's worth grabbing, especially for people that are sort of understanding the value of what you really should be getting out of architecture or good design. And what she said was, the first thing you do is find the right architect or designer, and not because there's your sister or your friend that has different tastes and different needs than you, but a designer that keys into the inner soul of what you want. You go to those people, you interview them, connect with them, and then you determine really how much square footage you need. And you let the architect say, I know you think you need 2,600 square feet and you want to spend $250 a square foot, but that's not a really good calculus for what you need, because I don't know that you need a formal dining room in today's world. I mean, do you really? And say, how about if we take the area for that formal dining room, we'll split it up into the family room and make it a larger great room. We'll connect it to the kitchen, and we'll take some other room over here that's useless. You don't need a smoking room. And so the bottom line is that now all of a sudden you're condensing your plan down into a much more modern open floor plan, and you're able to take that money and spend it on higher quality materials. And I'm not talking about the gold leafed columns and stained glass for your front door. I'm talking about materials that are enduring, higher quality tiles rather than linoleum, subway tiles. Right? But those are the things that get cut, right? Or higher quality appliances. I'm not saying upgrade to a $12,000 Wolf, but I mean, that would be my first choice if I had $12,000. But I'm saying, do you look at individual items and say, how can I spend the money on things that are going to be enduring? Because, you can say what you want, but I've been in plenty of renovations where we take out a 25-year-old Sub-Zero and the thing is as good as it was 25 years ago. And there's a reason for that. Or you take, here's a one, you probably know the story of the Weather End furniture. I mean, they're built in Maine, and I want to say it's built out of teak, and then that is some sort of an all grip process. I mean, and it's a fortune. Like you go buy a chair, and it's like $6,000. But you buy a chair, and the chair is like you can give it to your grandkids. I mean, so you think about those things, where you want to spend that money. I'm being extreme, but I really get back to: do you want linoleum, and do you want fiberglass tub, or do you want a better quality a tub with subway tile that maybe in 15 years is going to look as good as the day as it is that you put it in, as long as you don't pick avocado as many of our clients did in 1975.
So, do you find that, what is it, something like 1% of homes get built with an architect in America or something like that?
Yeah, it's very low, and it was one of the original ideas or premises behind the first group I was involved with, the Congress of Residential Architecture. And the feeling was is that how do we get good design to the masses? Because if we could somehow make that break, the whole world would be different. I could talk about this for an hour alone about um, why is it that certain objects, or is it possible to take certain objects? And I'll give you an example which has huge negatives, which is the development of the iPhone, or Steve Jobs and his whole industry, who basically takes sort of a European design set that was, I want to say it was a Bang& Olufsen. It wasn't Bang & Olufsen. If it was Bang & Olufsen, or there was another European computer stereo system that was made. And he basically took this design methodology that no one could afford. I mean, these things were thin, razor thin, beautiful designed European. And he said, if you give the public great design, they're going to appreciate great design. Well, great design costs a tremendous amount of money to produce. And so how can we do the same thing that has been done with the iPhone, but do it for architecture and do it for the housing industry? I mean, think about what Sears and Roebuck did at the turn of the last century. I mean, they're producing books of stock plans where you basically went to Sears and you picked the house out of a magazine or out of a directory, a catalog, and everything showed up in phases. I mean, you built your foundation and the framing showed up, and it was all the framing for your house, and then the plaster showed up and it was the right amount, and then all the fixtures showed up and they were all good quality because they were producing these pieces at such high mass that you ended up with a much higher quality individual component than you did in these older things. So how can we do this today? And what would it take? And I've said this for a couple of decades. It's going to take somebody like, I know this is going to sound crazy, but Nike or Home Depot to get together and go, okay, we're going to hire 50 architects and we're going to lock them in a room and we're going to understand what regional design is. And we're going to start to actually, because you can't just have an iPhone that everybody is for everybody. I mean, that's a whole nother hour discussion, is the importance of regional design and how design should, in my opinion, match the context or region for where it is. And we can go on to that later. But it's I just lost my train of thought. In any case, it's crazy.
Yeah. So you're going to put all these designers, architects in a room, and they're going to come up with like 7 designs for New England and 7 designs for Georgia, like the South, and then people can just buy the plans. Because if you don't hire an architect today, you go online and buy a set of plans for like $200 and have it made. Is that the other side, the other option?
There's nothing in the middle. I'm looking to see if I have this magazine here. Okay, so in June of 1994, on Life magazine, let's see if I can get it right there. Okay, Robert Stern designed a stock set of plans for Life magazine that people could buy. And there's actually a couple of them in Rhode Island, if you see them. And it was actually worked on by a friend of mine who still is at Ramsey, Robert Stern Architects, Gary Brewer. And they sold, and I think I'm slightly making this up on memory. They may have sold them for $1,200 or $2,000. Maybe it was $1,500 for a set of plans. And you literally got an architect set of plans. It was a minimal set, but it was a real set of plans. And they sold millions of dollars worth of plans. Millions. And no one even expected it.
Yeah.
So that was just because if you it's no different than the iPhone. If you provide good design to the world, enough people are going to get it that there's a market for it, but people aren't brave enough to do it. So I don't know how, I'm making this up again. If you put, if you gave me, if I put together 5 of my best friends, the top shingle style architects that I know, and we worked for 2 years on shingle style houses, I would bet you that we could come up with 20 shingle style designs that would be ready to be produced in 3 years that would go to the masses of New England. Okay, I realize that that's just a small quadrant of the world, but that's why I'm saying is if you have the commitment to do that, there's a lot of, I believe that there's a lot of money on the back end so that all of these bigger companies, I was working on a project, which if you search my name, and there's some blog out there where I started working on a modular house about 5 or 6 years ago. The idea of using recycled concrete and making concrete blocks and making a modular house out of concrete block with insulating and the whole thing. I never finished it, but and the idea was that if you can give these objects that actually can be reused in different ways but are such high quality and get them to the masses. I was thinking about integrating these in. I was sizing them for Pella Window, or you could use a window company like Pella or Anderson and have them be a branded company that would actually work with your grid. I mean, the opportunities are endless. It's not that difficult, but it take again, it's not going to happen with me and you and a couple of shekels between us to work on this. It's going to take somebody like, again, Home Depot, Lowe's, Nike, that's going to say, we're going out of the box and we're going to change the way that people think about design over the next 5 to 10 years. And there's a huge market here that's untapped.
It does seem like that. It seems like there is because we're lucky enough to work on some beautiful homes, and it spoils you for the rest of the world. You drive down, you see the rest of the world, and oftentimes large homes that you just know there wasn't an architect on, and it's like they hurt to see. And I'm not an architect. I can't imagine what it's like for you to drive down the road and see some of the buildings the homes that are built and the proportions and the number of roof lines and these weird sized dormers, and like it goes on and on. So I do feel like there has to be some way to like fill in that gap. It's interesting.
And it's funny because there's a term called bad trad. And so again, I'm involved with the ICAA New England. I've been the president for, I don't even know, 5 or 6 years. And so our goal is always to teach people the importance of classical traditional architecture. And when we see this bad trad, which is like makes a mockery of itself and say, I don't know what's worse, that or modern. There's a huge debate over martinis about, well, I don't know, maybe the bad trad is better because at least people are trying, and maybe it'll give them incentive over the next decades to get better at it. And I don't know what the answer to that is I'd rather go with that angle that the most important thing is to hire people, hire designers, and that's architects, interior designers, decorators, landscape architects, get the team together and make decisions based on the client's budget. The budget could be $350 a foot, or it could be $550 a foot. But that's where you get the designers to go, okay, well, we can't afford this, but maybe we can use a little bit over here. And so when you bring them in and don't get intimidated by that, it opens up an endless opportunity. And there's a whole different thing, which is the whole social aspect of it, which is the whole Pinterest and Instagram, not Instagram, Pinterest and House, where you're collecting images and marketing decent looking light fixtures and plumbing fixtures to you through these vehicles. So it's easy to get tricked into the fact that you can do a design project and you can play designer. It's easy. And sometimes you can get away with it. I mean, you can say, I'm going to reproduce. I've had people call me up and go, what color cobalt blue is it on that wall? Because I want to reproduce the same thing. And so it's that level. So you can pull it off, but more often than not, you end up with the polka dot tie and the plaid pants. And you're like, that doesn't work. And so guess what? You can't like after a night of humiliation, throw the clothes in the basket and go, I took a loss.
Yeah.
You've got these oversized stone columns that you built for $80,000 because you saw them in DC that don't match your house. And you've got moldings that look like they belong on a clown show. And so that's where it's really important to have the designers sort of guiding you through, being your shepherd through the design process.
You know, somebody just mentioned that you need an Instagram intern to start helping you get the word out. And I concur. I think that I'm just envisioning a whole architecture feed on Instagram that is just like the juxtaposition between a good designed house, a well-designed house, and a poorly designed house. So there's a woman on Instagram called Building Science Fight Club. Are you familiar with her? Okay. And she just breaks down what's good. Like she'll teach people like what's good, and she'll go in and like kind of pick apart what's bad with building science. So if you had this like just a feed of like two pictures next to each other with a like breakdown of the details between good design and what's poor design, I think it would be a viral feed, and you could affect so much change by starting to like show people like this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. And eventually I feel like you'd have a massive following, and it would be very educational and entertaining at the same time.
Yeah, and
when you're free,
that is it. It's definitely it's going to be insulting to not only non-designers, but it's going to be insulting to designers, and it's going to be insulting to mediocre arcs. So that it realize it would be a brutal game.
You have to do it anonymously.
So wait 1 second. Oh, sorry. So in the old days, actually this was a Christmas gift from Dave Rislow, who is watching right now. My senior associate has been with me for 23 years. He gave this to me about 22 years ago for Christmas, a set of these.
Is that video?
These are examples of what used to be like sort of the dictionary or the Bible of how people built. They used to get architecture magazines and various monographs that were very inexpensive. I mean, just a paper, just old paper. And this used to be the volume of how carpenters and contractors, that's how they learned how things were good and bad, is they reproduced the pictures of what these editors gave to you, curated for you, and as good architecture. The problem is that, I'm sorry, 90% of the people that are curating or publishing right now, I'll call it 80%, are publishing garbage. I'm sorry, a lot of it is beautiful. It's like glossy, beautiful, wonderful, out of crazy. How many times, I've been saying this for my entire life, how many times do I have to see a beautiful interior with a stairway with no handrail and say, oh, wow, that looks so cool? That's the biggest insult, like, to everything that we're doing. I mean, the whole purpose of our handrail is to save lives. And so you're going to eliminate the handrail and celebrate it, yet and there's where we are. We're in this weird world where we've forgotten the importance of what an architect is. And an architect isn't to get you an award. It isn't to impress your neighbors. An architect is number one, I said before, is to, it's to guide you through the process to maintain your resale value again, but to guide you through the process and give you the right advice and actually protect you from the contractor. Now, I say that, and that's the way it used to be. The reality is that we don't work like that anymore. The contractors, most of the contractors and subcontractors that I'm working with, is my legal role in an AIA contract to work with as a representative for the owner, and I do, and the contractors know I do. The reality is that the contractors and subs that I work with, we're all on the same team. And so if I say this doesn't look right, they're like, holy moly, you're right, let's modify it. And so we're all really working on the same team. So I've never been to court in a situation with a client and a contractor fighting because they did the wrong thing, or you did something wrong, or used the wrong material, because everything is guided through almost like a family.
So we've been talking a lot about it, but can you just like quickly break down what you believe to be like what makes up good architecture? So it's holding the resale value. What else? What are the other key components of good architecture?
So, yeah, you threw me a softball.
You ever thought of this one before?
No, I just spoke on it at a conference. So, good architecture to me is architecture that is based in its, first of all, okay, I don't know how crazy to get. Vitruvius at the time of Christ, I'm sorry, I'm going long.
That's how you want.
Vitruvius at the time of Christ said that architecture, the ingredients of architecture were three ingredients: commodity, firmness, and delight. Commodity, what is it? Is it a bang, two-story bedroom, a two-bedroom house? How does the office work? I mean, how does it work? So that's commodity. Firmness is it needs to stand up, it needs to heat me in the winter, it needs to be engineered. That's firmness. So it's actually going to work as a structure. And delight is art. So is it beautiful? Does it relate to the people and people's soul? And why does that is where we'll go next. So those three things are the components of architecture. And the reality is that if you screw screw it up, you say like a cake, if you screw the ingredients up, it doesn't rise. And the fact is that if you don't achieve all of those things like firmness, and it starts to leak and it's rotting away and it's ripped down in 10 years, or the program doesn't work for an office space and people are unhappy, and so if that isn't all working at the right proportions, it's not successful architecture. So there's the core, the answer to life. That's great architecture. But getting back to the art part is that to me, there's like a newborn respect towards regional architecture, which regional design, local labor, local materials, local vernacular, weather, everything around you, but local culture and local people. So those things are the essence of what makes, to me, great architecture, is that when you look at that design, forget what it is. If it's traditional or if you're really good, it could be modern, but you're going to be really good to do it. So step up your game, because it's more difficult to draw out that the symbolism in modern architecture. I mean, great architects have done it, so it can be done. I think that's the next horizon for modern architecture, is to draw upon those traditional and cultural necessities and draw them into modernity, and not have it look like a freshman architect designed it out of cardboard and tissue paper, which is 50% of the stuff that's published today. So am I being honest here?
I love it.
So I think that's, and the thing that, the way you can look at it is, it was only in late, I think 1989, in Tuscany, in the Tuscan, no, it's actually in the Piedmonte area of Italy, that they started the slow food movement. Slow food movement was basically, we have to eat what's local, eat what's in season. It actually started officially at the Spanish Steps in Rome. That was their first exposure nationally to the world when they opened up a McDonald's at the steps of Rome. So what they did is in 3 short decades is transform the world on the way we eat. I mean, it's inconceivable that you could actually that I go into a store right now and I look and go, not only is it local, or not only GMOs in it, like, which good. I'm asking all of these questions about what I'm eating and what I should be eating to support my neighbors, and actually taste better. And that all came from the slow food movement. I envision, or my hope and dream, is that architecture is beginning a transition after the 1980s and postmodernism back to this discovery of regionalism. And architecture over the next, I'm hoping, 20 to 30 years is going to become regional again. And people aren't going to say, well, I need that stone from Rome, or they're going to go to Vermont, and they're going to say, what's the stone around me? What's the labor around me? I know that that's sort of maybe bad for international and national products. Now, some products you're not going to get around. I mean, there are no national window companies, but there are many, many products where you can go to local mill workers and local artisans to take a handmade, I'm hand designing it, a custom designed kitchen cabinet by local neighbors and friends, and then hand painted by somebody like yourself. And that connects with me for a million different reasons, more than somebody seeing something that looks like a piano finish in Italy that really is beautiful and stunning, and importing it over so that they can impress their friends. But you know what? That's just me. And that's the difference between the people. That's how we started long ago when we started this conversation. That's the difference, usually the difference between people that come to me and people that maybe are looking for that bling.
Yeah, that's so. What does actually? So, what gets? I have one question about modern architecture. What is being sacrificed with of those 3 pieces with bad modern architecture? What would you say the main sacrifice?
I'm in defense of modern architecture. You can screw up modern architecture and traditional architecture equally. So just like the you were mocking, you're 100% right. When you look, I mean, many juries of architectural awards, and I've looked at projects and go, oh my God, this person is building a 10,000 square foot house, and probably had a $8 million budget, and it's like B plus architecture. Now, there's nothing wrong with B plus architecture. But like, there aren't that many opportunities for architects in the world. I mean, you can't screw that opportunity up. And in these cases, it had nothing to do with budget. Like the same copper molding, the same finishes, the same wood roofs, but like the proportions, the windows, and you look and go, it's pretty equal for modern to traditional. You're either on your game or you're not. The one thing that is different is that the latest zeitgeist of modern architecture is pretty weak. I mean, it's a combination, again, like SketchUp. SketchUp is a 3-dimensional program that you can free. It's an amazing program. You literally, I tell people, you can, in 2 glasses of wine, you can actually be running this program with your kids and have a ball. It's just an amazing program. Is like that anybody can do. There's no soul in that. There's no culture in that. There's no history in that. And the problem, it may win the awards and it may look good to some. If it doesn't relate to culture, it's going to be ripped down in 25 to 50 years, and it's going to be replaced with something with culture. So I think that we're in a time right now where a lot of the stuff that's going up, and I hate to say it, a lot of the stuff that's going up in this right now, sort of the spec stuff that's going up with this like new skins and everything, they're just not something that is going to be enduring. I hope not, or Providence is going to be going to a very, very bad place. So I guess my point is that culture in whole over years has the ability to take down things that aren't well received by the masses. And even though some modernity may be accepted by the minority, especially the people that run glossy magazines and give out awards, and even we all like to see them, the reality is that most people walking down the street like to see something that relates to culture and history.
That's interesting. I love what you said about, so I also have a very bizarre pet peeve and thing that bothers me a lot, but it's when budget is not a constraint and clients still get let down. And it's a silly thing to care to be, well, it's more because it's selfish. Like, I can provide a very high quality product to a client who has the budget, and when they have the budget and don't get it, it's like, oh man, we lost out on an awesome opportunity to make somebody really happy. We're working on a proposal for a project in Westerly, and there is $1.5 million at least in millwork in this house, and the paint job, it makes like hurts my soul how bad the paint job is.
Right.
And it's like all they needed was a sample and someone to show them a quality product, and everything would have been better. And instead now, like, maybe we get to come in at the end and fix some of it, but no one wants to pay to have stuff redone right away. It's just like, it sucks when you see people who have all the budget in the world and they don't get quality.